state of freedom. We are T minus basically what, Chris, 5, 6 days from the end of session? 1 week.
Yeah.
1 week from the end of session today.
Yes, absolutely. So
Eh,
I'll be able to say, Danielle, that I'll spend about a year in the legislature over the next week.
No kidding. At least 1 year. And I'm happy to report that we have a lot better news today than we did on Tuesday. We're feeling optimistic and we are fighting hard. And as you said, Chris, we are punching through to the bitter end. This is no time to put our to take our foot off the gas. This is no time to feel discouraged or relaxed. It is time to push harder and harder than ever. And that is what we're doing. And that's what we're hoping that you will do with us. So let me read the scripture of the day, and then we will get into some good news, some okay news, and some unexpected turnarounds. So let me find my Bible. Here it is. Okay, today's scripture is Ephesians chapter 4, verses 7 through 9, and it says, "And he has generously given each one of us supernatural grace according to the size of the gift of Christ." This is why he says he ascends into the heavenly heights, taking his many captured ones with him, and his gifts were given to men. He ascended means that he returned to heaven after he first descended from the heights of heaven, even descending as far as the lowest parts of the earth. And that has always been kind of enigmatic scripture to me. It's a little mysterious. Um, but as I was dwelling on it this morning, the Lord did give me some thoughts to share. So, one is that the supernatural grace that God has given us is according to the size of the gift of Christ. And we know the gift of Christ and the salvation he has made available to us is immeasurable because he says that his great love for us caused our sins to be separated from us as far as the east is from the west. And what is supernatural grace? It's not just undeserved favor, which it is that, but it's not just that. It's also the operational power of God that enables us to do the work that He's called us to do. And this passage goes on to explain that when Jesus ascended to heaven out of the depths of hell, where He went on our behalf because of our sin, He made a way for us to be seated with Him in heavenly places, even simultaneously as we live on the earth. And not only that, but as he did, he gave us spiritual gifts like prophecy, teaching, evangelism, many more, along with, and probably most importantly, the gift of the presence and power of the Holy Spirit, which came 50 days after his ascension to heaven on the day of Pentecost, which we will celebrate this Sunday, June 8th. So, all that to say, if you are not sure what gifts the Lord has given you, ask Him to show you. Ask Him to make it clear. Ask Him what your purpose and assignments are for this time because they change over time. And He will be faithful to do that as you seek Him.
Yeah. Danielle, that's beautiful. And it reminds me that we are all created for some purpose.
Yeah.
You know, there's no random creation of God. None of us are here by accident. And if we really think about that and think about the fact that I'm not here by accident. You know, I was formed and knit in my mother's womb, and God does have his operational power, as you say, and supernatural grace available to me personally, as if I was the only one in the world. And when you think about that, it's absolutely awe-inspiring to think about the fact that God desires to gift me alone, with that supernatural grace and that great operational power. And all I have to do is reach out in faith and take it.
Yeah.
Isn't that powerful?
It is powerful. And I think we can either take for granted or not recognize that grace sometimes because when we're operating where the Lord wants us to, his grace is on it, and that gives us ability that we would have never have naturally. And it's easy for us to say, "Oh, well, I do this and it's easy for me. It must not be that big of a deal." No, that's God's grace because not everybody can do what you're so good at.
Exactly. Exactly. And it is, and you know, people also, Danielle, and I do this as well sometimes. I try to look for the rational. I try to look for what is logical and what is rational. But St. Paul tells us that God's grace and God's joy surpass all human understanding. We're not supposed to be able to understand God's grace. God's
Yeah.
grace is very often counterintuitive to the logic and the intuition of the flesh. And we have to remember that. So just because we don't understand it, some people are even disturbed a little bit when they are under the influence of God's grace because like isn't it all supposed to be so hard? Isn't it all supposed to be so difficult? Aren't I
It
supposed to be struggling or anxious or stressed about something right now? But St. Paul says it's the joy, the peace, the grace that surpass all of our understanding. So when the world and the circumstances tell us that this is how we should respond, God is telling us this is how you should respond, and this is the influence that you should be operating under. So it is possible to have pure joy and pure happiness and pure peace amidst worldly chaos. Isn't that a powerful thing?
that is a powerful thing, and we are seeing a lot of worldly chaos
Yeah, I would say
in some
so.
places that you tread on regular basis, the capital, namely. And this week has been jam-packed. I mean, it has been so incredibly busy, and, it's a funny time because as unpredictable as most of the session is, these last few days, this home stretch is the most unpredictable because some things get shoved through that you would think would have so much controversy surrounding them. Some things get hung up or just don't advance, which we have, either high hopes for or we were hoping would get killed. So basically nothing's off the table in these last lingering days, as they try and get through to the finish line. There was a bill, Chris, that we have been trying and we just learned that we've tried so far unsuccessfully to resurrect, and that was Senate Bill 2. It's by Senator Mike Facey. It was his bill that would ban fluoride. Would you give us an update on that?
Yeah, I talked to Senator Facey about that this morning, and he said that because the bill was voted down or involuntarily deferred, that it can't be resurrected at this point. So the SB2, Senator Facey's fluoride bill, is essentially over for this session. One thing we did do, we did send, before we knew this, before Senator Facey told us this, as you know, we were operating under a call to action for SB2
Yeah.
for the speaker to get it for a vote on the House floor. And he's gotten close to 100 emails. So even though he really can't do it at this point, he certainly knows that the sentiment of the people is behind SB2 and getting the fluoride out of
Yeah.
our water. When you get 100 emails in a 36-hour period from just regular ordinary citizens, well, you tend to wake up and say. So I believe that this bill will be ripe for next session, and I'm confident that Senator Facey is going to bring it and we'll get it through.
Yeah. It's so disappointing, right?
Yeah,
Because this situation is proof that who testifies matters, and you've said that, right? You talked about how in the House Health and Welfare Committee there were, people who were well spoken and seemed to give good arguments against the ban on fluoride, and perhaps that's why it prevailed. So just an encouragement to our listeners, more than ever, your voice matters, and the other side is inevitably speaking up, is regularly speaking up, and if we don't speak up, we're not gonna get what we want.
yeah, we're not going to get it. We have got to be relentless because the weight of the political apparatus is against ordinary regular citizens, and we've said that repeatedly.
Yeah,
So we have to play always like we're 8 to 10 points down,
yeah,
and always be overcompensating because that's what we have to do to be able to win.
yeah. Because we gotta punch harder, punch
Yeah, we
harder.
got to punch even harder.
Yep. Okay, well, there's a couple bills, and, we were in a rush this morning, so my notes here may be a bit disorganized, but I think I've got them together in some kind of reasonable way. So just y'all give me some grace for the way that we walk through this, but there's a couple bills that are heading now to House appropriations, and we'll start out with those. The first one is Senate Bill 100 by Senator Blake Miguez. This is his, bill that requires reporting for, illegals who are receiving state services, just the amount. Basically an accounting and transparency bill. It passed, and I think we talked about the fact that it passed the Senate, but it's been sent to House Appropriations. I think it was going to a different committee and then maybe got recommitted into House Appropriations. So we expect it to be heard. Do you know, Chris, is House Appropriations meeting this weekend?
Not to my knowledge. I haven't
Okay.
seen it. I know that the Senate Health and Welfare, I believe, is meeting on Sunday, and
And maybe the House just hasn't published
yeah,
its
maybe
its
not. And
committees
I'm
yet.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the House floor is definitely meeting on Sunday because Brett Guyman's HB 601 has been moved to Sunday. And before you go on, I do want to mention something about HB 601. I can't state specifically what is going on behind the scenes on this for tactical reasons, but I can tell you that we are very much alive and very much in this fight on eminent domain for carbon capture pipelines in
Yeah.
Louisiana.
And
Very
we'll
much in the fight.
and it is and we'll get to it a little bit later as
Yeah.
well, Chris. But just a question for you. In 2023, the last time we had a fiscal session, it was an epic disaster, explosive mess of proportions that we're still reeling from. The way that they busted the budget cap in 2023. Do you have any sense, we passed some bills over the last couple years or that and we supported those bills that would make it so that if they if they try and pull that stuff, they're going to have to stay at the legislature. If they try and push this stuff to the last minute, it's not going to be a race with a deadline. They're going to have the ability to extend the time
Yeah.
to deal with those bills properly and in a way that respects the taxpayer dollar, hopefully. Do
Yeah.
you have any sense where those big appropriation the omnibus might be?
Well, I know this, Danielle, you touched on it because of two bills from Representative Bakala from last session. It's impossible for the Senate to send over these gargantuan amendments on omnibus bills over to the House for them to consider with 30, 45 minutes or an hour left in the session.
Yeah.
It is in law now that they will always have a minimum of 48 hours to review and consider any appropriations bills that are amended and come back over from the Senate. And if necessary, they can even extend the legislative session by up to 2 days at a time. So we will avoid that catastrophe. I would also like to think that we will avoid, from a practical point of view, the catastrophe that occurred in 2023 simply because the people are very attuned right now,
Yeah.
particularly in light of the federal Doge, particularly in light of what we're seeing on the federal level with regard to the fiscal malpractice that has occurred on the federal level for so long, and which also has occurred on the state level. That people are attuned to this, and I think legislators are going to be much more sensitive to throwing money around like drunken sailors, like they did previously. And we certainly are keeping a very close eye on what they are spending our money on, what they are appropriating money for. And I
Yeah.
have noticed, Danielle, this session, when I have been in front of appropriations and these executive committees have come before appropriations and asking for money, that there has been more scrutiny and more detailed questions about what the money's for, what the money is going for. So I think there is a greater level of awareness in the legislature, simply that the people are not having this anymore.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we're going to see, either in terms of the size of the budget of what they're spending or in terms of the mechanism with which they do it. I don't think we're going to have the same kind of issues that we had in 2023, but we're keeping a really close eye on it.
Great. Yeah. I can't stomach the thought of having that go the way it did again. And Chris, when we first started out, there was a lot of money being spent on some really ridiculous studies. It was like if people couldn't get their really dumb bill passed, and not always dumb. Okay, this is for good bills too, but like often an answer is to just commission a study, but only a fraction of the time does that even make sense as an answer, right? Like, in some ways, it's a way to save face with constituents or with a certain constituency, probably not the entirety of your constituency. But but I haven't seen quite as much of that this session. I don't know if you've made that observation.
Very little things are going to these study resolutions. There have
Yeah.
been one or two, but for the most part, there have been up and down votes on bills. They've either succeeded or they've failed, but very few have been referred for what's called these study resolutions to
Yeah.
study the issue. And I do think that as a general rule, Danielle, that's unnecessary. And it's often done, as you said, to save face with constituents and even with colleagues.
Yeah.
So, but I think very rarely is a study resolution actually necessary. Most of the time, people are aware of whether an issue is good or bad, whether something is needed or isn't needed. Now, there are times when study resolutions are necessary, but I think by and large, they're not.
Chris, what do you think? Should Senator Facey uh, put forward a study resolution on fluoride? I mean, there's plenty of studies that already exist on it. I don't know that a study is necessary, but if that's on if that's on state public record, the findings of that could I wonder if that would help the effort next year.
I think that's a possibility, but I also think that one of the reasons why this is going to go through next year is because we're going to make sure that the Republicans who voted against this in the House Health and Welfare Committee, we're just going to make sure that the constituents know about that
Yeah,
and that they hear from their constituents.
that's
And then
right.
when we come back in next year, hopefully there'll be a different vote on it. So I don't, yeah, I think that's a possibility, but I
Yeah.
think that the evidence about the harm of fluoride, Danielle, for anybody who is objective and really understands it, is out there, and I
It
think
is
it's of
out there.
record now.
I agree with you. And next year, I expect them to be on a little bit better behavior because they're going to be a little bit closer to reelection time.
Yeah, and SB2, Danielle, as you know, I mean, all the good bills that are killed are always killed because of the votes of Republicans because these committees are
Yeah,
Republican dominated,
so
just like the
true.
whole legislature is.
So true. So that's where the blame falls, and we put it right at their feet. Okay, a couple bills heading to Senate Finance now. First one is House Bill 309 by Representative Philip Tarver, and this was one that we talked about on Tuesday for the first time, and it creates a separate mechanism of appropriations for NGOs so that people can see clearly what are the what where are taxpayer dollars going for core essential government functions and going to government agencies and departments, and what is going to outside entities. I really like the premise of this bill. I like what it's setting out to do, and it is now heading over to Senate Finance.
Yeah, and I think that this bill should go through. We've been following it over the last several days, and everybody, particularly the tax-paying public, has a vested interest in being able to clearly understand money that's appropriated directly to public agencies for public need and money that's appropriated to these NGOs. And we see again on the federal level the absolute abuse of taxpayer money that has occurred by these NGOs, and also how a lot of that money has been kicked back to federal politicians and
Yeah.
lined their pockets.
Hmm.
This is important to separate the appropriations of money to public agencies and those that go to these non-governmental organizations.
Yeah.
Really important.
It is really important, and I'm sure those kickbacks are definitely happening in Louisiana as
Yeah,
well.
and that is just as important, Danielle. That's even more important or equally important as Senator Miguez's bill requiring these public agencies to report to the legislature specifically how much of our tax dollars are going for public benefits for illegal immigrants. I think we
Yeah.
have a right to know that. The public has a right to know these things.
Yeah, and, well, that's a perfect tie-in to the next bill, House Bill 307 by Representative Chance Henry, that's requiring, reporting to ICE for anyone who is collecting or applying for public assistance. That was reported favorably from Senate Judiciary B earlier this week, and, like I said, this is in the bucket of heading to Senate Finance, which we expect you said to meet on Sunday.
I don't know. I don't know if it's up there yet for Senate Finance. I know Senate
Okay.
Health and Welfare, I believe,
Okay.
is meeting Sunday, but we will absolutely be following it. It may be there if they go down, if they meet on Sunday. So, but this bill, HB 307, Danielle, it's very important. It
Yeah.
requires any local or state governmental agency to report directly to ICE if anybody in their custody is receiving public benefits who's here illegally. That's, important, and they have to report them to ICE and let ICE. Now, as a general rule, Danielle, we talked about before, this really has not been too much of a problem in Louisiana. It is in other states where they're refusing to report the status of these
Yeah.
illegal immigrants to ICE. It's not so much a problem in Louisiana, but it's still important to have this etched in law because you don't know what's coming down the pike tomorrow.
Yeah.
And this is preemptive legislation. It's important, and Representative Henry is well to push this forward and make sure this gets signed.
I bet there are some pockets where this is facing resistance in Louisiana. I mean, you think about Latoya's office. I mean, I have a hard time thinking she's over there having her staff report this to ICE.
Yeah, I guarantee you it's occurring. Probably not on the, I'm sure not on the level that it's occurring in
Yeah,
other states.
I would agree with that. Absolutely. Okay, a couple bills heading to Senate Judiciary C, and that the first one is House Bill 76 by Representative Pat Moore. This is we talked about also for the first time on Tuesday, a bill that creates the crime of the felony of intentional infection of a sexually transmitted disease, which faced some remarkable opposition from people whose character I certainly question now. Um, anyway,
Yeah, and
the majority
including
of
yeah,
yeah,
the what about the 4 or 5 Republicans who voted against criminalizing the intentional infection of a somebody else with a incurable sexual
it's
transmitted disease?
remarkable.
Yeah,
It's
it's
really
remarkable.
remarkable.
McMahon, Mellerin, um, and several other
Stagney.
Republicans, Stagney, several others voted against it. I think did Freiberg. Anyway, we'll I don't know,
I don't
but
know.
anyway, we talked about it on a previous show, and we'll
Yeah.
have it all listed. But yeah, 4 or 5 Republicans who voted against that bill. So now it's going to Senate Judiciary C. I'll be honest with you, I don't think that that should face any opposition in a Senate Judiciary Committee. But we're going to be watching
Yeah.
those votes too. It's important.
It is important. Okay, a couple bills have achieved final passage or enrollment, and I just kind of want to roll through those so y'all are aware of where these things stand. The first one is Senate Bill 216 by Senator Valerie Hodges. This one we were huge champions of. She is authorizing DOTD to use certain bidding processes require some incentivization of on time or early completion, and also has a stick if it doesn't happen.
Yeah. So DOTD needs to reform its mechanisms, no question about that. Get the road projects done, completed in a timely manner. We have to drive on these roads and do it efficiently, and try to have some regard for our money, in this process. And that's what SB 216 will do, Danielle. So really good bill by Senator Hodges. Senator Hodges has done some really good things this session. We've been in touch with her pretty regularly, and she is a real asset in the legislature.
She is. She is. And Chris, we've reached out. I believe we've reached out to Secretary Joe Donahue's office to come on the show in a couple weeks. I don't think we've heard back yet, but it will be great to get him on to talk about how what the effect of the legislation that makes it through this session will have on DOTD's ability to operate. I would imagine that between this and if that bill that Jay Morris's bill, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that makes it easier to hire and well makes it easier to fire civil servants gets passed by the legislature and then the citizens, that would be a recipe for true reform at DOTD.
No question about it. Yeah, SB 8, good bill. And by the way, SB 216, Danielle, Valerie's bill on DOTD, cleaning up
Hmm.
their systems and making them more efficient and completing these road projects. Joe Donahue was down there
Good.
in the committee, and I'm sure he supports this legislation.
Yep. And so that passed on Tuesday, and it'll be heading to the governor for signature. The next one on this kind of everything at the legislature is done. Theme is SB 14 by Senator Patrick McMath. That is his Make Louisiana Healthy Again bill, getting the dyes and chemicals additives out of children's food at schools. That passed and got through Senate concurrence without objection.
Yeah,
So we expect that to go to the governor
to the
soon as
governor's
well.
desk. And Danielle, I really enjoyed testifying on this bill. And, as you were talking about it, I'm reminded once again that when I was growing up, we were simply not allowed to eat processed food in my house, and we
Yeah,
used to get really really angry and upset because it's like, why do the Sewells get to eat Pop Tarts and all this stuff, and we have to sit over here and eat apples, and so. But my mom was way ahead of the game, and she understood, that what we consume is so much a part of how we feel, how
yeah,
we act, our mental acuity, and our physical condition. And she just was always on top of that, way ahead of her game. And I think it's high time that kids in our schools, many of whom eat both breakfast and lunch at school every day,
yeah.
uh, are consuming healthy foods, and not poison. And I don't think it's a stretch to call it poison. Do you, Danielle?
No, I don't think it's a stretch at all. No, I think it's well stated. Chris, the next one that is up or that has been enrolled is Senate Bill 80 by Senator Greg Miller. You and I have uh, talked at length about this. We've been strongly opposed to this bill since we first laid eyes on it. It's an abhorrence. Um, it's been sent to the governor, and I know there we still have a strong call to action on this to get the governor to veto it.
Yeah. If there's anything that you do for LeCag, anything that you do for the state of freedom, hopefully you do a lot for us. But if there's anything that you do, please make sure you do the call to action, the email to Governor Landry urging him to veto this SB 80, this horrendous bill that censors the fundamentally protected speech of ordinary Louisiana citizens. And that's exactly what it does. It's a bill that's pushed by Secretary of State Nancy Landry, and Governor Landry has every reason to veto this bill. He only benefits himself politically while at the same time that he's serving the Constitution by vetoing SB 80. So
Yeah.
we need everybody to send an email to the governor's office and urge him to veto SB 80. It's at his desk as we speak.
Yeah. And don't do it for us, do it for you. Do it for your children, do it for free speech.
Yeah,
This is a huge attack on free speech and our right to
yep.
assemble outside of a polling place. So,
Our right of association, our right of speech, Danielle. And remember, tyranny progresses by degrees, which is which is why we have to confront it as we see it, and
yeah.
not wait until a molehill becomes a mountain.
Well, and I think we we're I feel some days like we're standing behind the mountain that we have avoided for a long time. So,
Yeah, but as long as we have a lot of citizens standing there, we can climb that mountain
or take it down.
or take it down.
All right. Okay, the next one that has been sent to the governor is Senate Bill 46 by Senator Mike Facey. This is his bill for the banning of geoengineering and weather modification. You have a call to action up on this as well, encouraging the governor to sign it immediately.
Strong call to action. Senator Facey has urged us to reach out to the governor and urge him to sign SB 46 now.
Yeah.
We don't need the poison in our atmosphere and our skies. Anybody who says this is not occurring obviously is watching CNN too much and drinking some really, really sweet Kool-Aid.
Hmm.
So it is occurring. It's got to stop. SB 46 must be signed by the governor, this chemtrail bill. And so please do that call to action as well, SB 46. There's no reason why Governor Landry should not sign this bill right now.
Yeah. The last one that we've been tracking that's enrolled is SB 39 by Jay Morris. This was his bill that got dramatically weakened. I think the original intent was weakened, and the original intent was to basically not make um, uh, prisons liable for illegally detaining people longer than their sentence.
Yeah, and it has been gutted. We testified against this bill in the Senate committee because At that point in the legislation, they were focused almost exclusively on limiting the recovery or limiting the liability of the state when the state clearly, in cases where the state clearly is holding inmates past their outdates. So instead of resolving the problem, they were simply trying to punish and penalize the people who were bringing actions. Let me out of jail. My time is up. That
Yeah.
was inappropriate. That has been largely gutted from the bill. And I also wanted to report, Danielle, something that we mentioned before. When this was heard over on the House side, SB 39, there was a very clear explanation by the lawyer for the Department of Corrections in there, talking about the ways in which they are updating their communication systems and they are streamlining and making their systems much more effective and accurate with regard to getting these inmates out of jail when it's time to get out of jail. And I
Right.
think they're very serious about doing that. So I think at this point, the bill at this point is largely innocuous. It doesn't do much. I think Senator Morris wants to get something across the finish line. But the big concern we had was that DOC needs to clean up its system and its processes, and they clearly are doing that.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, a number of bills are headed to the House floor today. First one up, which is one you've already mentioned, Chris, House Bill 601 by Representative Brett Guyman. This has been subject to call a number of days now, running in a row. We've expected it to come. It hasn't come yet. Do you have any reason to expect, Chris, that it'll be called up today?
I don't know for sure whether it will be called up, but again, I just want to assure our listeners here, particularly those who are very concerned about this carbon capture sequestration racket as it relates to property rights, that we are on the verge of a significant win with regard to CCS for carbon capture pipelines. And I just want people to know that. Again, I'm not at liberty to talk in detail about it now, but you have every reason to be optimistic at this point that we are going to end up coming out in a much better position with regard to property rights in CCS.
And Chris, I'll just encourage folks on that note. Nothing is a foregone conclusion. So to ensure that that happens, go to lacag.org and do the call to action on House Bill 601. Make sure that your legislator knows that you support property rights versus the Green New Scam. And
Yeah,
even if
and
you do
represent
support the Green New Scam, you still support property rights and they need to pay for it themselves, right?
Absolutely. They pay for it themselves and don't do it on the property of people who don't want it. But
That's right.
Representative Guyman is strongly encouraging people to continue, as you said, Danielle, to send the calls to action on HB 601. And
Yeah.
all of these calls to action can be found at lacag.org Action Center.
Yeah. Well, you say that, Chris. It's lacag.org/action-center. It's not
Oh,
just,
yeah.
like if you
I
want to
guess what
be
I'm
really
saying is,
specific about it, go to the Action Center button when you
well,
get to
right, you can
lacag.org.
go to lacag.org and then go to the menu and do Action Center, and
Okay.
that brings it up.
Okay.
Or you can just do what you said.
Okay, cool. I just want to clarify there.
Yeah.
Okay, a bill that we have been following since the beginning, but it hadn't had any motion until this week. It awakened from a long slumber. House Bill 586 by Representative Dixon McMakin. He is calling for a constitutional convention. And like we said, Chris, there's no Cleo Field standing in the way of this one. So I am very concerned with its progress. It was voted unanimously out of House and Governmental Affairs, and it has been sent to House Appropriations. I have a feeling that the House is under pretty strict orders to move this thing along as quickly as possible if the governor wants it. And I don't have any reason to think that Speaker de Villiers would be bucking that wish.
Yeah. And we'll see how that goes. You would think a constitutional convention, as a general rule, would probably be a good idea, but the devil's always in the details, Danielle. The devil is always in the details. It's supposed to be 105 delegates there. We'll see how those delegates are chosen, and we'll see, the political philosophy of those. We'll see what kind of relationship they have with the governor.
Yeah.
And if there's a risk that we go into a constitutional convention and the governor uses this as an opportunity to amend the Constitution in such a way that further consolidates his power and further diminishes legislative oversight, then we're not for the Constitutional Convention. So it's again, it's all about what happens, what the goals are, and how it develops. But if as long as that is a risk, then I just as soon have uh, amendments submitted to voters on a statewide basis, subject by subject, and let them decide on each issue one by one. And that way it's less confusing for them, and I think it would be done in a way that may be more methodical. But I have concerns about a constitutional convention. Depending upon what the goals of it are. If they're just going in there to try to clean things out of the Constitution that really don't belong there, because there are a lot of things in there that really are not constitutional issues. If they're trying to take things out and put them in statute that don't belong there and really make the Constitution a broad governing document like it was intended to be, then I'm all for a constitutional convention. But if there's a political agenda afoot, then we have to be very wary of it.
Well, I was a lot more apt last session to be optimistic about it. The way that this legislature has operated this year, largely in opposition to the will of the people, largely in opposition to the freaking Constitution itself. I am strongly, strongly opposed to this. Absolutely. And you
Yeah.
know what? I will be opposed to it until we have fair and free elections in this state because I can't trust that the people who are serving, this is me. I can't trust that the people who are serving were actually voted in there. I can't trust that any votes that we make on the Constitution itself as a convention at the final say is going to be a trustworthy vote because do we know that our elections are manipulated? Absolutely. Absolutely. On For the Love of Freedom on Tuesday, I had a guest who, Chris, you and I hosted previously, Edward Solomon, talking about how the Dominion machines have a specific algorithm that flips the votes. It absolutely flips the votes. It's proven. He's proven it. He's proving it in court. And I'm not here sitting around going to pretend like, oh yeah, let's go ahead and go to a constitutional convention so that we can change things whenever we don't have any any confidence that when we vote on up or down whether to accept or reject a new constitution that our vote is going to be counted correctly.
Yeah.
So no, no, abso-freaking-lutely not. I'm against it.
Yeah, and that is absolutely a legitimate concern, and, you know, I think maybe one of the reasons, Danielle, why, the governor is pushing for a constitutional convention is because he has more control over a constitutional convention.
Yeah.
Whereas if he's submitting these amendments, as they're supposed to be constitutionally directly to the people in a statewide vote, the people have an opportunity to not only vote for or against in a clear and simple way, but an opportunity to even overcome the algorithm that may exist in these machines. And who knows whether or not there was some manipulation on Constitutional Amendment 2 or some of those other amendments. And who knows whether or not the people simply voted against it so overwhelmingly that that algorithm was overcome, that was
Yeah.
compensated for. We don't know.
Another concern I have, Chris, is one that we brought up with Representative Boyer last session whenever this was raised previously before Cleo Fields blocked it completely. And that was I wanted to carve out a promised carve out for our election law to remain the same because we have great election laws in the Constitution. Great, the way that it's set out is very protective for the people, protective for the vote. Now that's being blatantly and disgustingly violated by the Secretary of State every single day of the week, at least on election day. But the protections are there, and I'm very nervous that those would be stripped out or watered down to mirror some that are in other states that give them a lot less recourse legally to challenge the system.
Yeah, and I'll give you a couple of examples of what you're saying, Danielle. The Constitution of Louisiana requires that votes be counted publicly. Are we counting our votes publicly in the state of Louisiana? Of course not. It's a fundamental constitutional requirement. It also requires that the votes be preserved inviolate in the event that there is a challenge to an election result. In our state, not only are the results not preserved inviolate, you can't currently even audit our elections in Louisiana. There's no way to
Yeah.
audit elections in Louisiana. So you're right. The constitutional requirements are there. They're simply not being followed. And maybe yet another motive, possibly, for a constitutional convention is to go in and just eliminate those constitutional requirements altogether because it's still a headache. Because there's currently a suit in the 19th JDC challenging the constitutionality right now of Louisiana's method of counting votes
And I
because
wouldn't
they're
put anything past Nancy Landry at this point, not anything.
yeah, I don't. I think she's very, very sneaky, and just got to keep an eye on her. And I've heard from a couple of senators that I've spoken to that they are keeping a close eye on her, and she's not fooling them.
Yeah. Well, that is encouraging. That is encouraging. All right. So, let me see here. Okay, we already mentioned, but we can just touch on it again. SB 8 by Senator Jay Morris. This is his proposed constitutional amendment to be able to easily fire public servants,
Yeah,
unclassified, classified service,
Exactly,
civil
and
service.
and what it'll do. This is a constitutional amendment. So if it passes 2/3 of both houses, Danielle, it'll just go to a vote of the people, and the question will be: do you support the legislature having the authority to reclassify state employees from classified civil service status to non-classified? And if they go to non-classified, then there will be a lot more flexibility in being able to manage those employees in terms of holding them accountable
Yeah.
for doing their jobs. And I think it's important to do that because they really are largely untouchable in the state of Louisiana. It's very, very difficult to fire a classified civil service employee in Louisiana. And what does that do naturally? The natural tendency is to create a disincentive to perform well. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just human nature when you know you can't be touched. I mean, like I told you before, when you were working for Pfizer, Danielle, if you had had the same classified protection that many Louisiana state employees have, you don't think that that would have perhaps created a disincentive for you to perform on your maximum level? I think it probably
Right.
would have.
I think it probably would have. Okay, headed to the Senate floor today is a ton of bills. I think we might see a lot of these things get closed out today. The first one is House Bill 528 by Representative Ryan Boriak. We alluded to it earlier in connection to the bill we just talked about, Senate Bill 8, the firing of civil servants. And this is his bill that would transform the transportation department, which is in dire, dire need of an overhaul.
Oh, is it? Is it? The systems, yeah. I mean, there's no question about it. I don't see how this is even controversial. It is
No,
a
it's not.
good bill. So between this bill by Boriak and Senator Hodges' SB 216, I think that there could be some real changes both to the procedural part of DOTD and even into the structure of DOTD,
Yeah.
which is just a labyrinthine bureaucracy right now. I admire Joe Donahue for going in and,
Yeah.
and trying to reform that. But it's got to be demoralizing and discouraging for him at times to try to reform a bureaucracy with that scope.
Yeah.
I think about that sometimes. It's like what a job he has.
I know.
Hopefully, these two items of legislation will help him to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Next up, House Bill 405 by Representative Matthew Willard. He's a Democrat, and we have been supportive of this bill since we saw it early on in pre filing days. And this is requiring the Secretary of State to be transparent about how she is enacting or moving forward with new laws that have have been signed by the governor during the most recent session.
Yeah, and we supported this bill yesterday in Senate Governmental Affairs. So the bill basically requires her to prominently post on her website any laws that change the election code, that change election law in Louisiana because there are so many. And Representative Willard is like looking at this. It seems like every single day he's going, I'm down here, and Secretary Landry is down here pushing some item of legislation or another related to our elections and our election procedure. And I think that probably is what motivated him to bring this bill so the people can be kept informed about what's going on with our election system. We have suggested an amendment to HB 405 that requires the Secretary of State to post on her website all developments in the procurement process of the new voting system. We're talking about $100+ million of our money.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of frustration among citizens, particularly those concerned about election security, about not knowing when these meetings are occurring, about not knowing where she is in the procurement process. It's impossible to find this information on her website. So we're trying to update that and require her to routinely and timely post and update information related to the procurement process and the certification process of this new proposed voting system that she wants. It is hugely important. And on this line, I want to tell you, Danielle, this is was bizarre. The day that we heard House Bill 577 in Senate Governmental Affairs Committee, where Nancy Landry's pushing it regarding changes to the procurement process, the
Mhm.
day of that meeting, Bert Calais went home, went to the Secretary of State's website, and was able to find some information on a link to the certification process, the procurement process, the voting standards, upcoming dates for different public meetings. He went on there 2 days later, and it was all scrubbed off of the website.
She's a
Nothing
she
up there.
So I guess she's assuming that she's gonna get her way and none of that stuff is gonna matter anymore. She can just do what she wants.
Well, I asked Bert, I said, "Bert, why do you think that she did this?" And that's exactly what he said. He said, "Because I think she's acting as though a couple of these bills that she wants have already been passed, and they haven't been passed."
But they
And
haven't
so
been
but
signed either.
and they haven't been passed or signed. So what does that tell you? She talks constantly about how transparent she is and how transparent her process is, when in fact she's being less transparent than probably any other public official in the state. Because if you were to go on her website right now, you would not be able to find any information about the most significant taxpayer investment that this state has made in the last 10, 15, 20 years with regard 20 years with regard to our elections. A huge amount of money, and you can't find any information about it.
The only thing she's being transparent about is the level of how disingenuous she is actually being to the people and frankly to the legislature. If I was a legislator, I would be really, really unhappy with the way that she's testified because it's she has just, I think, lied to their face.
Well, and I'll give you an example, and not to beat the horse here, but very recently, Secretary of State Landry and the First Assistant Secretary of State Catherine Newsom were testifying in front of the Senate Governmental Affairs Committee, and Senator Carter asked her a very specific question, and it was about voter registration. He said, when somebody comes in, Secretary Landry, and then they try to register to vote, and they check off on the registration form that they are a U.S. citizen, but they're not, but they're lying. What kind of vetting process do you engage in order to verify whether they're telling you the truth or not? And guess what the answer was? It's all on the honor system, Danielle. It's all on the honor system.
Oh, that's how you enforce laws on the honor system? Is do you so whenever Chris, when Jenin would never do this, but let's say you take Jenin to the convenience store and he lifts a pack of Laffy Taffy, that you're gonna deal with him on the honor system on that? Or you're gonna say, "I see that Laffy Taffy, and I know you didn't have any money, so how'd you get the Laffy Taffy?"
Yeah, show me the receipt, Jenin. Show me the receipt, Jenin.
"Sorry, Jenin, I'm not
Yeah,
picking
sorry.
on you on purpose."
Oh, I know. But Danielle, you know why this really made me sit up in my chair is because right now on the books in Louisiana is Senator Facey's SB 436 from
That's right.
2024 that's been on the books. It's been the law now for close to 6 months in Louisiana that requires anybody who's registering to vote in our state to provide proof of American citizenship. It is a requirement of law, and the Secretary of State and the registrars of voter have to enforce that law. It's a law. And so I was quite surprised when she answered Senator Carter the way that she did. She is obviously not enforcing the law in the state. And so, we
Is
posted
that
about that.
malfeasance in office?
Well, I mean, well, at a minimum, it is, colossal incompetence. So what is, I mean, that is what she's paid for, to secure our elections. So
Yeah,
come up with a simple way to verify citizenship when people are trying to register to vote. It is a huge issue, and you're not enforcing the law. And she was sitting at the table with Senator Facey back in
that's right.
2024, when he passed the bill, and I testified in favor of it. So
And
these are
and
things.
she made him delay. That was the only way he could get it through, the enforcement date of the bill, right? Because
Yep.
she said she didn't have enough time to get it done. Well, she didn't have enough time to get it done, but she hasn't done anything on it since what, this time last year?
Yeah, this time
Longer?
last year. This time last year,
Yeah,
his original bill in 2024, Danielle, made it effective on signature of the governor. And
that's right.
she wanted to push it back till January of this year to begin enforcing that law so she could come up with a mechanism and a process and a procedure. Well, apparently, it's now been in place for close to 6 months, and she still has not given the registrar of voters any guidance with respect to enforcing this important law. So, I mean, I think that's a real problem.
Yeah, and I think she's doing what she wants to do, and for whatever reasons, that she has that I don't know what they are, but she's certainly not doing what's in the best interest of the citizens.
Yeah.
And
And
and if she thinks she's doing what's in the best interest of the citizens, she's not because she's not listening to what the citizens want.
Yeah, and leave it up to a Democrat on the Senate Governmental Affairs Committee to ask the question that Louisiana citizens wanna know the answer to, and now we have the answer to.
Yeah. Bravo. Bravo. All right. So we'll see if this gets the amendments on it, Chris. And you also did request, Chris, that the bill include in the that an amendment could include a directive to follow the executive orders of the president as it relates to the
Yeah,
election. So I pray that makes it in there.
and keep in mind, she's already on the record saying recently that she is following the directives of the President Trump's EOs. In fact, she says she's 99% in compliance with President Trump's executive orders,
It's
which I find that just bizarre that she would make such a statement.
99% out of how many, I guess? Out of like 6,000%? 12,000%?
Right. Exactly. I guess it's all relative. So, but
Yeah.
anyway, so she made some important concessions recently before Senate Governmental Affairs that we have and that we have clipped, and she made them in response to Senator McGuez's question. So she is on record stating, Danielle, that we're not going to be using any kind of foreign parts for our elections. None of our voting systems are going to be coming from any foreign country. And so she's on record saying it. So we're going to absolutely hold her to it. In the event that we do end up going forward with a computer-based voting system, but we're fighting all of it to the end.
We are fighting all of it to the end, and I trust her word about as much as I trust that she is enforcing the citizenship to vote
Yeah,
law.
and I
So,
trust her word slightly less than that.
yeah. All right. Next up is one we have not talked about in a little bit, Chris, so you're gonna have to pull this one out of your the archive in your brain, but House Bill 592 by Representative Bo Boye is also up. It's been subject to call for a while. Any updates on this one?
You know what? I haven't been following this one too closely, but I think I don't think there's anything sinister about 592. I mean, I think it's not one that's been really up on the radar screen for me because
Okay.
there's so many of them. There's a number of them that absolutely are.
Yeah.
This one has not been.
Okay. One that absolutely is House Bill 590 by Representative Annie Spell, and this is her bill to get foreign funding out of our elections. And it's been pending Senate final passage for about a week now, I think, but it's subject to call. Maybe it'll go today.
I'm wondering, Danielle, why this bill would not have already been voted on and not already have gone to the governor.
Yeah,
This
this should
bill,
should I mean it should get Bagneris treatment, I would imagine. It should just have flown through.
Yeah, exactly. That this should not be controversial. It fills a loophole in Blake Miguez's former constitutional amendment that was signed by the people. His bill keeping foreign money out of the coffers of our election officials in Louisiana, or any,
Yeah.
they can't go in there to prevent Zuckerbucks type situations. That, we don't want that. And this bill complements that by simply saying that no non-American citizen and no foreign country can donate money for the purpose of advancing any candidate or any campaign or any ballot proposition in Louisiana. You just can't do it. There's a wall, between a stone wall between foreign money and our election system. And I don't know why. And maybe if, my more cynical mind may think that there is a tactical reason why they don't want to pass this bill, because perhaps some of them maybe are benefiting from that type of largesse. I don't know for sure, but there's no reason why this bill should not be passed and signed by the governor. And they need to stop putting it off on the Senate floor. They need to vote on HB 590.
Well, you know my perspective. Since they already gave themselves the right to pay for their Mardi Gras dues and their mortgage with campaign donations, shutting off this valve would be just, crippling to
Yeah. How about this, Danielle?
their future prosperity.
How about this? Can we just hold them to a very stringent requirement? And this is alluding to 590. Why don't you just pay your mortgage and pay your Mardi Gras bills with domestic campaign contributions instead of foreign campaign contributions? Do you think that's too Spartan like, too much of a requirement?
I wonder if we could get Annie Spell to put I it this that whole thing just disgusts me. I guess we'll have to move on so I don't get
Yeah,
too I'm so
right.
disgusted by these people. It's an absolute disgrace.
Yeah. This needs
Um,
to be passed, HB 590 for sure.
it does. It does. And maybe the listeners will join me. My prayer has become either turn their hearts, Lord, or replace them with people who are more worthy, because we're not getting the representation we deserve. And we're probably not getting the representation that we voted for.
Yeah.
Uh, all right.
Either turn their heart or turn their feet so they can't walk.
That's right. Okay. House Bill 206 by Representative Michael Mellerin. This is the holy grail for Nancy Landry. Let's make all of your illegal actions that you do at the Secretary of State's office and registrar of voters and across the state retroactively. If you do any illegal actions, we can make them retroactively legal. That's
Yeah.
so crazy.
Basically, what's going on there, and we have a call to action up on this, Danielle, with a lot of emails that have gone out urging the Senate, and I've been in touch with this, number of senators. Even spoke with a couple of them this morning on this 206. So yeah, there's no reason for this legislation, except one that is not legitimate, which is to try and extend Cleo Field's congressional career once the U.S. Supreme Court nullifies his current seat. And so there's no reason to vote for this. Every reason to oppose and kill HB 206.
Yeah. So this has been now, but this has been subject to call for a while. It keeps being returned to the calendar. That's encouraging, but we don't put anything past these people to try and sneak it through at the last minute.
Yeah, well, we'll be keeping a very close eye on this today for sure.
Yeah, another one that falls into that camp is SB 214 by Senator Royce Duplessis. This would be it would change the way that we uh, get a commissioner of insurance. Instead of electing him or her directly, it would just go to the governor as an appointment.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure with no requirements.
With no regard, absolutely bad, absolutely bad. This has been
Yeah.
returned to the calendar a number of times, but it is set for vote, at least theoretically, on the Senate
Mhm.
floor today. And we oppose this for reasons that we've talked about an awful lot before. The
Yeah.
insurance commissioner should be elected by the people, not appointed by the governor.
Yeah. And it's been subject to call since May 20th, but like we said, nothing is off the table. And look, you don't win any awards for trusting these people.
No, you don't. You certainly don't, and you might actually at least avoid some darts by not trusting them.
That's right. Okay, Senate Bill 226 by Senator Valerie Hodges. Y'all haven't heard us talk about this one for a while because we just haven't been sure if she's actually even trying to bring it or if she's just going to let it die because it mostly died in committee anyway. Gutted by the words of Secretary of State Nancy Landry, with the extreme help of Senator Greg Miller, who's been carrying Nancy Landry's water all session long, which has caused me a little bit of it just causes you to scratch your head and say, I wonder why he's doing all this for
Yeah.
Secretary Landry.
Because of this session, I'm always and perpetually going to associate Senator Greg Miller with Nancy Landry,
Yeah,
because literally he has fawned over her and done every single thing she's asked him to do, every
yeah,
single thing.
yeah,
And I want to remind the listeners that SB 226, before it was gutted by Senator Greg Miller's committee, would have allowed our Attorney General to expropriate any property in Louisiana currently owned, immovable property currently owned by a foreign adversary like China, if that property is located within 50 miles of a military base or a critical infrastructure facility. I mean, that just seems like an extraordinarily important piece of legislation. That
yeah,
was kicked, that was killed in it. And also the codification in the bill of President Trump's executive orders regarding election security. Those two things were both gutted out of the bill. So now it doesn't really do too much. I think that I wouldn't be surprised if it's not called at all on the Senate floor. But I'm
yeah.
not going to ever forget what happened to that bill in Senator Greg Miller's committee.
No, and I just saw, Chris, that yesterday Governor Katie Hobbs, she's Arizona, right? Katie
Yeah,
Hobbs is in Arizona, the fake elected. Of course, no one believes that she beat Carrie Lake, but she just vetoed a very similar bill yesterday. So Greg Miller can count himself in her ignominious company.
yeah. Hobbs and Miller.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Next up, House Bill 64 by Representative Mike Johnson. And this would give a little more power to the Attorney General in a good way to protect the sovereign interests of the people. She gets to weigh in if the federal government is encroaching on localities' uh, sovereignty. Is that right, Chris?
And we've been strong supporters of this bill. This is on the Senate floor today, right,
Yep.
Danielle? On the Senate floor for a vote. Yeah, this protects state sovereignty against federal encroachment and allows the Attorney General to nullify and have complete dominion over any agreements that are consent agreements or otherwise that are entered into between any state or local official and the federal government. If those agreements violate the sovereignty that's guaranteed to our state under the 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. So I'm a big fan of this bill. And it is complementary in a sense to SCR. I think it was 21 back in 2023 that we
Mm-hmm.
passed. It was
Yeah.
a joint resolution, House and Senate, affirming Louisiana's right to nullify any unconstitutional or illegal act of the federal government. So this is an important piece of legislation, and Representative Johnson has done a really good job getting this to the point where it is. So if it passes in the Senate today, this will go to the governor's desk.
Yeah, great. Okay, next up, House Bill 603 by Representative Dixon McMakin. This one we haven't talked about in a minute. It would just give more power to the governor. He would basically be allowed to ignore any recommendations from professional associations about his appointments to certain committees and licensing boards. It originally failed in SG&A, thanks to, I believe, Senator Miguez, and somehow was resurrected and now finds itself going to the Senate floor.
Yeah, and there were some amendments made to it. I think strengthening the uh, oversight, the Senate oversight over the confirmation process.
And I
So
think the
that
requirements, the maybe the professional requirements of the appointed.
yes, and the professional requirements, but the bill uh, has been resurrected, and it does allow the governor to not follow the recommendations of the trade associations when it comes to who he appoints to these 31 or 32, the heads of these 31 or 32 regulatory boards in Louisiana. So, uh, you know, we continue to oppose this legislation because not because we don't think these trade associations who are submitting these nominees do not have corruptive elements within them. Of course they do. But at least that corruption is diffused rather than being in the hands of one member of the executive department, namely the governor, in a state where he already has too much power. So that's why we oppose this bill and oppose the legislation, and we're going to continue to.
And I would less vigorously oppose this once our elections are fixed, because at least the governor has some accountability to the people. Those professional associations certainly don't. But the point about diffusing the power is an important one.
That's a
Um,
good point you make, Danielle, because somebody mentioned that to me this morning about specifically about HB 603. That one mechanism you have is reelection, and when a new administration comes in, then perhaps the appointments will reflect a different philosophy. There'll be a different
yeah.
group of people appointed, so at least you have that. Whereas if it's the same associations always submitting the nominees, then perhaps that's not a good thing. Everything that I say about bills like this, Danielle, is always viewed through the prism of my reluctance to put more power in the hands of the executive and
Yeah.
specifically this governor, because I don't believe that he has used his power very wisely, and I believe that I'm seeing things going through the legislature, many things that are all designed to increase his power, and I'm extremely skeptical about this.
Yeah. This
Yeah,
This one, I feel like in a way we're caught between a rock and a hard place, and I do agree with our position that we're opposed to this. We want more diffusion of power, but these professional associations and boards do operate like mini cartels. They run roughshod over their members. They tell them what they're allowed to say, how they're allowed to operate, and they censor their people. I mean, look at what the medical licensing boards did during COVID. Look at the way the bar association operates. I mean, Trump is punishing the ABA, thankfully. So I hope we start seeing more of that. So it's not like I have a great deal of respect for most of these organizations. I think many of them operate against the interest of their members, and I think many of them operate in the clear opposition of the people of the state. But here we go. It's at least diverse. I
yeah,
don't know what else to say.
yeah. So at this point, Danielle, I'm a little, I'm more ambivalent about this.
Yeah.
Considering thinking about it more, um, and I think that there are arguments to be made on both sides of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Next up is House Bill 160. Chris, you testified on this one, and we do have a clip that we can play shortly. But this is Representative Kelly Dickerson's bill. It's her ethics bill. You did a great job talking about, I don't know, do you want to set it up or should we just play the clip?
Well, I'll just set it up very, very briefly. This is a very good bill by Representative Hennessy that requires any person that files a formal complaint with the Ethics Board, Louisiana Ethics Board, against any Louisiana citizen, they have to at some point during the investigation disclose who they are. You can't just file an anonymous complaint and never let the person you're accusing know who you are or have any idea who's accusing him. This is the United States of America,
Yeah.
and there's due process and core rights that we have as American citizens, and one of those is to be able to confront, cross-examine, and evaluate the credibility of people who are accusing us of wrongdoing. I
Yeah.
mean, we don't live in communist China. So Representative Hennessy Dickerson's bill simply requires that the complainant has to disclose their identity when they're filing an ethics complaint against somebody. And also in the bill are very significant whistleblower protections against the complainant in the event that they have to file a complaint against a powerful public official. Severe penalties for retaliation against the complainant. So I think the bill protects both the complainant and the accused in this deal. The bill, Danielle, passed out of committee in a 4-2 vote, and we'll talk about the two Republicans who voted against this bill, after we run our clip if you want.
Okay, here we go. Let me, uh, all right.
Mr. Chairman, Chris Alexander, Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group. Just a couple of points here. Our organization is 100% in support of this bill, and I wanted to take a minute, some of my time to respond to a couple of points that Senator Miller raised. What you're suggesting here, Senator Miller, is that when someone is accused of an ethics complaint, no matter how serious, at no point in that process during that investigation is an accused entitled to know the identity of the person who is accusing them. I can't think of anything that is more fundamentally unfair or fundamentally un-American than to accuse someone of what is really a quasi-criminal allegation that's very close. And at no point in that investigation does the person who's accused ever get to evaluate the credibility of the accuser, because it's not always just based on documents. I think credibility in these types of complaints is always an issue. At no point will the accused be able to explain to the ethics board the history of the relationship that they may have with the complainant, the motive that the complainant may have to file this complaint. And all of that is absolutely relevant to a real and fair investigation. And I understand your point about how it could potentially have a chilling effect, but that's why the bill has the same kind of whistleblower protections in it that are in other parts of Louisiana law. So there has to be a way to strike a balance whereby an accuser does not have to worry about undue retaliation, and an accused is treated fairly and has a right to evaluate the credibility of the person that's accusing them and give information to the board. And that is hugely important. One of the fundamental constitutional rights that we have in this country in any criminal case, even in a misdemeanor case, which are often far less serious than these ethics cases, is an absolute right to confront and cross-examine and evaluate the credibility of your accuser. And if that right is not afforded, guess what? The whole case gets thrown out. It's that important because credibility is always an issue. So we support this bill 100%, and I think that the law needs to change so an accused at some point during an investigation can know the identity of the person that is accusing.
Nice job, Chris.
Well, thank you very much. And that basically explains our position on it, Danielle. It's really important in a free country that exists. And it passed out of committee in a 4-2 vote with the help of 2 Democrats and the 2 Republicans, Senator Miguez and Senator Facey, who voted for it to make it 4-2. And interestingly, and not shockingly at all, Senator Greg Miller voted no on this bill in committee, as well as Senator Mike Reese.
Wow.
2 Republicans.
Where was Senator Klein, Peter? Because he was up there for your testimony. He stepped out, or
well,
he just didn't lodge a vote.
As the chairman,
didn't
oftentimes
have to.
they don't vote unless they have to break a tie.
That's
So
right.
that's
Okay.
basically the work, and he's the chairman of the
The
committee.
chair.
So anyway, but it's important that the bill passed. It's now going, Danielle, to the Senate floor, right?
Yeah.
Senate floor, and is it set today?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see. We should have a lot to report on Tuesday.
Yeah, this is important. This needs to pass.
Yeah, and I know you've mentioned it, Chris, but we're expecting them to go in this weekend, at least on Sunday, right?
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. Okay. Next up, House Bill 690 by Representative Chuck Owen, and this is his bill that directs the Surgeon General to give us some guidelines for any medical activities or products that are are under emergency use authorization in Louisiana.
Aren't we entitled to some clear guidelines after the COVID fiasco, when you had federal health agencies suggesting that the COVID vaccine was safe and effective, had been
Right.
FDA approved when it had not been? This is in response to all of that, so people can have an understanding of whether something that is being pushed on us by state or federal, mostly health authorities, is actually safe and effective, has actually been approved, and what are those guidelines?
Yeah. And I would hope by guidelines that he creates some strong guardrails, um, for to protect us.
I hope that he includes the fact that we are under no obligation to uh, to take or to accept any medical protocol or any vaccine that is under emergency use authorization only.
Yeah.
And you know, as Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has said, Danielle, and I hope that this is also included in the law. Emergency use authorization is only to be used by law when there is not any less intrusive or any safer
Hmm.
alternatives. And if they had followed the law during COVID, because there are safe alternatives like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, we would have never been hammered with this vaccine. They had to suppress that and suggest, as Fauci did, oh, this is the only alternative, and lie about that in order to be able to push this emergency use authorization COVID shot. That's what they did.
Well, I love what RFK Jr. said, Chris, because if that's the case, then there's never a case where there's not a safer alternative to what big pharma is trying to shove down our throats,
Exactly.
or shove in our arms.
Exactly.
All right. Next up, House Bill 371 by Representative Beryl Amade, and she is moving right along with this one. Happy to see that, Chris. This is her free exercise of religion bill. Give us a little background on this. It was, I believe, headed to Senate Judiciary A and got rerouted to Senate Education, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they want to. There's a group up in Shreveport that wants to rent out a one of their churches for a religious activities involving students, school activities involving students, but it's based in their religious faith. And the local fire marshal up there is imposing all of these codes on the building because these buildings are very old. Codes requirements, they have to spend all this money to upgrade their buildings, and he's not imposing the same requirements on the secular buildings. He's not going in there and saying, no, we can't issue your permit until you do this and this and this and this and upgrade all this stuff. So he's basically discriminating against the religious this religious organization and not doing it and not treating everybody the same across the board. So
Okay.
this bill basically would require the codes and the building restrictions to be all the same across the board. You can't be more burdensome on a religious school or religious building than you are on a secular building or a secular organization, because it's really caused a lot of problems for them up there. And so this is important. It passed through the Senate Education Committee yesterday, and I'm 100% in favor of this bill.
What kind of permitting, Chris?
Oh, it's a permit. It's a permit basically for use. There are certain safety protocols. Basically, he's saying that one of them is okay. Your alarm system in here, your fire system is not up to speed. And other things that they have to go in and look at to make sure the building is safe, to make sure it's functional. Do you have a fire escape over here? All these things that he's imposing on this religious group that they're not imposing on the secular groups and those that in the buildings that they occupy. And so
It
I
just
think,
all sounds very burdensome and unconstitutional.
yeah.
Why should any organization have to apply for a permit with a stinking government to hold a meeting of any kind?
Well, exactly. I mean, that's the point. It doesn't. It's all government. It's all really government overreach. But if you're going to overreach, just be an equal opportunity overreacher, and don't treat religious organizations differently than you treat others.
I'm ready to see some people who are really radical about small government get into office because this is garbage. This is absolute garbage.
It
The way
is.
that they treat us like literal slaves. They do. That you're allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that. If you want to do this, you have to ask permission of me. No, I don't. No, I stinking don't.
Yes. Thomas Jefferson, Danielle, said that the only legitimate object of government is to prevent one individual from directly infringing the core constitutional rights of another individual. It's to secure and protect all of our individual freedoms and rights. That is the only function of government.
That's
Anything
right.
beyond that is a usurpation of power and an infringement of liberty. That was Jefferson's philosophy. Oh, how far we've come.
How far we've come. And with your Shreveport meeting example, those children are going of their own free will. I imagine this seems like an extracurricular type of activity. Why should there be any imposition by the government at all?
With their parents. Their
Yes.
parents are bringing them.
Come
You know,
on.
yeah, so I think this is a good bill, and it will provide some real relief, not only for this group up in North Louisiana, but for others who may be going through similar difficulties.
Yeah. Can you imagine if we had a full-time legislature, we wouldn't even be able to walk down the street.
Oh my gosh. You
They would
mean
they would be yeah, we'd all be having to carry, like, USPS packages for, I don't know. They would be making even more ridiculous requirements. It's a good
can you
thing we only
imagine?
have a part-time legislature.
Yeah. Danielle, what about if one year, the legislators got together and said, "You know what? We don't need to have a legislative session this year because we don't think we need to pass any more laws.
Wouldn't
We're
that
done
be
passing
beautiful?
laws for a year, and we're gonna stick with what we have." I wonder, do you think our state would completely fall apart if they didn't go in and make another law every year?
I bet we probably wouldn't even notice. But you know what, Chris? What I will say is I would love for them to go into session and just go there with the express purpose of getting rid of laws that are unconstitutional, overly burdensome, duplicative, and I think that pretty much covers it.
Yeah, devote an entire legislative session to doing nothing but repealing duplicative, bad,
Yeah,
or unnecessary laws
yeah,
and regulations on Louisiana citizens. The
yeah.
whole session. And then the next session, they
They
could
could do it
go
again.
in
They
and
could do it
devote
again.
or go, yeah, do it again, or go in, and maybe we need 2 sessions for that. And then go
Minimum.
in the next session and devote the whole session to streamlining and reducing the bureaucracy in Louisiana, just to
Yeah,
streamlining our government in a meaningful way.
yeah,
Wouldn't that be great?
yeah. It would be great. It would absolutely be great. Okay, Chris. Next up, House Bill 457 by Representative Denise Marcel. We've been big supporters of her bill, and this is her solitary confinement bill that makes sure that anyone thrown in solitary gets access to education materials and religious materials.
Yeah. Um, that is something that we asked Representative Marcel to include, to make sure that you add to your bill a provision allowing access to education to religious materials when someone's in solitary confinement, and it's very important. And it may not seem like a big deal, Danielle, to a lot of people, but it's a big deal to someone who's serving solitary confinement in
Yeah,
a 4 by 8
yeah,
cell, where that may be the only hope they have is access to the Scripture.
yeah,
And I think it's massively important. And I also want to note this bill because it's one of a number of examples where we have aligned with Democrats when
yeah,
they bring good pieces of legislation, or we've aligned with Democrats when they've opposed bad pieces of legislation. So I love the fact that you and I are open to working with Democrats when it's appropriate to do so. And sometimes, to be honest with you, there are occasions when the Democrats are the only ones in the room that seem to understand
yeah.
what's going on.
Yep.
They're the only ones in the room sometimes that are not just reflexively rubber stamping whatever the governor wants. So, guess what? They're our friends in that instance.
Yeah. And I like to think we're calling balls and strikes here, Chris, not picking favorites.
Absolutely, 100%. The
Okay.
Constitution does not have the word Republic or Democrat written it anywhere.
Yeah. Okay, next up, Senate Bill 117 by Senator Blake Miguez. This is his bill to ban ultra processed food in public schools. It's been back on the calendar, been recalendared a number of times, not called up in the Senate. I'm not sure if we're going to see this one brought up, Chris. We've talked about it a number of times now since Senator McMath's bill it has been sent to the governor's office, or is at least on its way to the governor's office. I'm not sure there's a need for this one, but we'll see if he ends up
Yeah.
bringing it.
Yeah, I want to go back for just a second. I got a good note from Rob Perry,
Okay.
who listens to our show. He's responding to my comment about when I spoke to a couple of senators, and they're saying that they understand what she's trying to do. And he said if the senators are wary of the Secretary of State and not being fooled, then they are knowingly voting with her, except Hodges. And I think he makes a very valid point
Yeah,
there. And you know, so he's right. If they know what's going on and they know what she's doing, well, then it's time to hold her accountable, fully accountable, and they seem to know. And the only response I'll make to that is that she is on record right now making some significant concessions. And what we can do is continue to raise the alarm and continue to
that's it.
hold her accountable to what she has said she will do, and continue to hold her accountable when she fails. Because one thing we all agree on is that nothing she says can be taken at face value. Nothing. She's demonstrated it over and over again.
Chris, is there any legal recourse for uh, what's the legal weight of what she testifies for or against? I guess any of her testimony in the legislature. Is there, whenever they call witnesses in Congress, they do so under the penalty of perjury. I don't think your testimony in the legislature carries the same weight necessarily or penalty as that. But how would that hold up in the court of law? Is public record. So is that matter if she ultimately gets sued? They can bring anything she says as evidence.
Absolutely, 100%. Now, she couldn't suffer, a penalty of perjury because it's not sworn testimony, but it absolutely could be used to impeach her credibility in any trial, because credibility, as I said yesterday, is always an issue. So if she were to go in, for instance, and testify on the case that's pending down at the 19th JDC and say something, she could absolutely be impeached with anything that she said before any committee in the legislature as a prior inconsistent statement. And it goes straight to her credibility. So, yes, she couldn't be subjected to a perjury prosecution, but it definitely would go to her credibility.
What do you think about asking for a bill that would ultimately make every elected official who testifies before the legislature do so under the penalty of sworn testimony?
In other words,
Or
you know
like
what?
under the penalty of perjury? Like if there are elected officials and they're testifying for or against something, their word should matter. It should be that they if they go down there and lie to the committee, there should be recourse. There should
Yes.
be penalty.
When they make statements as factual assertions, I agree with you 100%. And if they don't know something, or they shouldn't assert it as fact.
That's
And
right.
perhaps if they were testifying under penalty of perjury, they would be much more careful to say
I
what they
think
really
so.
know and what they don't know, and not make factual assertions that are just facially untrue.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I
you know,
bet they would be a lot less available to testify.
You know what? There probably be a few more absent bureaucrats
Yeah.
testifying in front of committee, and you know what? They might be sending some of their underlings a lot more often
Yeah.
to
But
testify.
I don't know. I think the whole shebang, if you're a government employee, your word to the people should be up or down. You if you lie to us, you are perjured, period.
Yeah, and they are speaking to us when they're testifying before those committees.
That's right. That's right. All right. Well, Chris, that rounds us out for today. We expect a lot of stuff happening this weekend and early into next week. Do you think they're going to get out on time? When do you think they're going to close this down? What's your prediction?
I think they'll probably get out on time.
Okay.
They'll get through to the finish line on it. I want people to keep a very close eye today. Uh, on SB 46, on SB 80 that are at the governor's desk right now. And I want the people to keep a very close eye on the Senate floor today
Yeah.
for HB 206. Really important. If you haven't done those calls to action, please make sure you go do them. The Senate will,
Even if you just haven't done them today, go ahead and do them.
yeah, you can do those calls to action every 24 hours. You can do it more than one time, but you can do it every 24 hours. So please make sure that you do that. And you can also call the Senate line directly, 225-342-2040, and encourage your senator to vote no on HB 206 and no on SB 214, Royce Duplessis' bill that would make the insurance commissioner appointed. Those are
Yeah.
two big items today on the Senate floor. Also, do all the calls to action while you're up there.
Mhm.
But it's really important. We've got to finish this session strong. We've got some good things, and if you also can do this when you call the Senate, tell them to vote yes on HB 160. That's Representative
The ethics
Dickerson's
bill.
ethics bill that you ran the clip on, Danielle. That's really, really important, and that's
Yeah.
really a matter of fundamental fairness and due process. So
Yeah.
please make sure you do that. We got to finish strong. They pay attention when they get a lot of communications from voters. They've told me that.
That's right.
And so as always, Danielle, it's always a pleasure to be with you, to work with you. I encourage people to join the State of Freedom, subscribe, and share our podcast because we are pushing the envelope and we are reporting to you the facts as they exist. And we're letting you know who's actually working for you and who's actually working against you and keeping you informed on it. So the broader we are, the more powerful we are, the more powerful you are. If you feel like your voice is being ignored and you need a voice, we are your voice. So please share and subscribe to State of Freedom. Go to the State of Freedom website, freedomstate.us, and donate. We are listener supported, and we need your support and your help to keep moving forward. And we will
That's right.
continue to fight for you. And
And
also,
maybe just
yeah,
a quick note on that, Chris. We are on Facebook, the State of Freedom, Instagram. We're on X as Freedom State US. We are on Rumble. We're easier to find on Rumble now. We're going live this week and next week at 8 a.m. Central Time on Rumble, YouTube, and X. You can find us much easier on Rumble now. Just put the State of Freedom in the search. You can find us as the State of Freedom on YouTube as well. And okay, so next week we'll be 8 a.m. live again, Tuesday and Thursday. And then after that, we'll go back to our regular time of 10 a.m. since Chris is not going to have to pedal to the metal to get to the Capitol for 9 a.m.
for exactly. And don't forget to go to lacag.org and sign up yeah, as a member. The way we are developing, Danielle, at LACAG is simply through small monthly memberships from citizens across the state of Louisiana,
Yeah.
22, 33, 44, whatever per month you're able to do. And we will be even more powerful than all of the powerful special interest groups in the legislature who are so deep pocketed and so well funded. But our source of power and authority, the resources we have, are going to be coming from regular, ordinary citizens. We're not going to be compromised to big special interest groups at all, not 1%.
That's
And
right.
that is the way we have set it up from the very beginning. We are going to be supported by Louisiana citizens so that we could go in and fight in good conscience, in good faith for those citizens, and not have to do the bidding on any level of the very organizations and the very special interests that continue to suffocate our freedom. So it
Yeah,
is extraordinarily important that you join LACAG. We need all of you on board.
that's right. And Chris, just a note that the State of Freedom has been really expanding. We are joining a radio network called Voice of the People USA Radio that will be kind of telling you more about over the coming weeks. And probably, I think that'll take effect over the next month or two. But want to let people be aware of that. And if you have any other ideas of how we could be expanding the reach of the State of Freedom, if there are outlets that we are not engaging that you think would be good venues for this show, please reach out. Let us know. Drop me a line at Danielle@freedomstate.us. I'd love to hear your ideas because we want this to reach every corner of the state so that people are aware of what's happening and they can stand up and make informed choices.
It is a powerful, powerful platform we have, Danielle, and it's such a blessing to be able to work with you, with someone of a kindred spirit. And I cannot get over how excited I am about how much ground we're gaining in the progress that we are making. You know, we were ranked, Danielle, again recently, and I put it up. We're number three most important political podcast in Louisiana.
Yeah.
You know, ranked ahead of a number of folks and organizations that have been out there a lot longer than we have.
Yeah.
So I think
It's
that there is
amazing.
and that reflects the fact that there is a hunger and a thirst for the truth.
That's right. That's right. Well, amazing, Chris. Thank you so much for all you're doing at the legislature fighting for us. We look forward to seeing how much fight you have this weekend. I know you're going in there ready to make sure that people take righteous votes. And we will report back on that Tuesday morning at 8 a.m.
Follow us on X, LACAG on X. Follow the State of Freedom on X and on Facebook. And inveighing we shall go. We have not yet begun to fight. Love you, Danielle.
Love you. Have a great day.
You too.